Hello and welcome to lesson 1. You should tell me. What's this? 1.8. Good. I can see you have studied your lessons. In this lesson, 1.8, we'll talk about where we live. If we live in the country, the city, in an apartment, in a house, where we live. But first, as always, we're going to review and review and review. This time we review the numbers, 1 to 19. We'll use the same PowerPoint we used in the last lesson, 1.7. Here we go. Okay, you say the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 first, before me. Then after, I will say the numbers, okay? You first, and then me second. Okay, here we go. Say it. Say the number. What is it? 2. Go ahead and say it. 13. 6. 8. 19. 10. 5. 15. Excuse me, 15. 1. 11. 7. 12. 9. 14. 16. 4. 17. 5. One hand behind my back. This is easy. 3. 18. 2 hands behind my back. 2. 6. 8. 4. 1 eye. 10. 15. No, I can't do that. 7. 12. You say the numbers. Say them. 18. 11. 9. 17. 19. 13. 14. 16. 5. 1. 3. Here we go, together. 2. 6. 1. 4. 15. 7. 12. 18. 11. 17. 8. 13. 14. 9. 19. 10. 16. 5. 3. Whew, we're done. We did it. Okay, now we're going to go into the lesson. What lesson was it again? 1.8. Very good. And we'll go through some of the exercises together concerning where we live. Okay, here's lesson 1.8. The first section is the video. Second section, we repeat and repeat some sentences about where we live, okay? First of all, this is he. Do we say he live? All right, this is the verb to live, but he live, I live, you live, he lives. He lives, that's right. He lives. Here's France. So, France. He lives in France. Let's listen.
He lives in France.
We got it. He lives in France. Next, Mexico. Mexico. Okay? So how would we say this sentence here? Right. He lives in Mexico. He lives in Mexico, for example. Here's an important expression for the language you're learning. The United States. Watch my mouth again. The United States. Repeat. The United States. Again. The United States. Okay. So what would this sentence be? He lives in the United States. Okay? So here you see some countries where one could live. Here are some cities, I think most in the United States. Detroit, New York, Paris, that's in France, Montreal in Canada. California is not a city, it's a state. Here's Quebec, also in Canada. Okay, so let's try saying some of these sentences here. Where does he live? Right, he lives in Montreal. Say this one. He lives in California. I live in Detroit. I live in Detroit, Michigan. Okay, good. Next section. Now these words may be a little more important because they're general. They apply to everyone, not just those who live in Detroit, California. Okay, this is the country. The country. Repeat, the country. What is the country? The country is a very calm place where there are birds. There are animals like deer, which run in the fields and which run into cars, unfortunately, where I live. There are cows, etc. Okay? That's the country. It's a very calm place. That's where I live. I live in the country. So what's this sentence? What does this say? He lives in the country. He lives in the country. Good. Next, this is the opposite. This is the city. The city is a place with tall buildings and lots of cars. Lots of noise. That's the city. San Francisco, Tokyo, London, Chicago, Moscow, the city. Okay? So what is this sentence here? He lives in the city. That's right. He lives in the city. I live in the country. I don't live in the city. Okay, next. This is an important word. A house. A house. Repeat. House. A house. A house is just one house. Not many houses. It's one house. We say a house or a house. So he lives in a house. He lives in a house. Okay? He lives in a house. Do you live in a house? Yes or no? Some of you said, yes, I live in a house. Others said, no, I don't live in a house. Okay? Next, this is an apartment. Really, it's an apartment building, but we're talking about one apartment. Do you understand apartment? Apartment, 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 apartment. A house is for one family. An apartment building is for many families. Okay, so an apartment. Repeat, apartment. Good, okay. What would this sentence be? Right. He lives in an apartment. He lives, that's important, but not that important. An apartment. We say he lives in a house, but an apartment. He lives in a house, but he lives in an apartment because it's awkward to say apartment. So we say an apartment. You'll get the idea as time goes by. So we have the country. Repeat. The country. The city. A house. An apartment. Okay? So those are places we can live. Let's look at these sentences here that talk about places where I live specifically. I live in a house. I live in a house. I live in a house. Okay? Let me ask you. Do you live in a house or in an apartment? Some said, I live in a house. Others said, I don't live in a house. I live in an apartment. Here is the country. I live in the country. I'm a country boy, frankly, and I like it. I live in the country. Do you live in the country or do you live in the city? Okay, I heard some of you say, I don't live in the country. I live in the city. Okay, and that's fine. Next, here is the United States, and that applies to me. I live in the United States. Do you live in the United States? Do you live in the United States? Probably most of you said, no, I don't live in the United States. Some might, who are learning English or immigrants, but most said, no, I don't live in the United States. Okay, let's look at the last section here. In the last section, normally you're to answer questions, but I'd like to hear you practice forming questions right now. So, do you remember how to form a question? The first type of question, that was, what's this word? Do. It's do or it's does. Do or does. Do I? Do you? But does he? Does she? Okay. Well, we're talking about you, so we'll say do, won't we? Okay. So here we have do, here's you, here's live, here's house. Let's put it all together and make a question. Okay? What you say it, I'll do the gestures. Okay? Do you live in one or a in a house? Do you live in a house? All right. Number 2, the second question here.
Do you live in a house?
Thank you. The next one. What's this? Do you live in, do you remember this word? The country. Do you live in the country? Okay, let's listen.
Do you live in the country?
Sounds good. Do you live in the country? This is the United States. What's the question? Without my help, form the question. What is it? Say it. Right here. Good. Some of you did it. Do you live in the United States? Do you live in the United States? Okay, and the last one. This is New York. Say the question. What's the question? Right. Do you live in New York? Do you live in New York? Very good. Well, that's all from my part of this lesson 1.8. Now it's your job to study the exercises under the video, to practice them, and we'll talk about where you live maybe at the beginning of lesson 1.9 the next time we see each other. Goodbye. I'll see you.